Hello and welcome to the second watercolor lesson. In this lesson I have a photo here for us. This is mountains with a lake, and you will notice that I've got gouache here, Gouache. It's a white gouache. I had mentioned something about gouache. It works a little bit like putting an acrylic paint over the painting because it's more solid. It will cover up more of what's underneath, but it's not quite as solid as an acrylic, so it's a little bit see-through. But I thought, okay, let me pick this picture here, and I can just touch it with a little bit of gouache to show you how it works. Now, if you don't have gouache, it's okay. You can leave that part, or you could potentially use a couple little pieces of the blue tape and stick it down in that area to cover it up if you want the snow to show. But see, there's those little dots of snow because these mountains are really high up. And so even though actually it's summertime in this picture, but it's very high in elevation and there's still some snow up there on the mountains. So what I'm going to try today is to put a little bit of gouache on there at the very end, but if you don't do that part, it will still look fine. It will look great. Let's get started. I've got my brushes, my water, my paints, and now I need to think about composition, how the parts are put together. I had said I wanted to talk a little bit more about composition in this class, not just here it is, let's recreate this picture. Oh, look, I can point to it, right? Here it is, let's recreate this picture. But how are the different parts working together? For example, when I have this photo here, there's a whole lot of sky. But that's not really the part that is interesting to me in this picture. What's more interesting is the ripples in the water, as well as the little specks of snow on the mountain. So when I make this painting, I'm going to rearrange it a little bit. In other words, I'm going to not use everything that I see straight from the photo. I'm going to crop off some of the sky, and I'm also going to crop off some of the area on that side so that you're just focusing on the area that I'm interested in. Let's do it. First thing that I want to think about is, how is it going to look? Where are the different parts? Unlike the clouds, we want to think about where the placement is a little bit more carefully. You can either use a pencil, or you could potentially use a little fine brush and some watercolor and sketch in the area first. Since there's a lot of dark contrast here and we're just going to sketch it in lightly, any fine thin pencil lines should be covered up, or if I use just a little touch of watercolor, it should get covered up in the end and not be a real problem. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to use the watercolor to sketch this in with a bit of brown. But not too dark. Plenty of water in it. Trying to make enough here so that I don't run out. I happened to clean my palette after the last time. Ooh, it's nice and clean. Okay, all right. So composition, how the parts are put together, but the purpose of the composition is also how the parts are put together in order to direct our eyes. You can see how the mountain is coming in and going back towards the background. So I want our eyes to kind of think, okay, there's some lines here and there to point our eyes in that direction. And since I'm cropping off a lot of that sky, I'm not going to use as much of it. I will make my line between the mountains and the water a little higher up, not in the middle. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So it's split right now about 1/3 and 2/3. That line is not exact. It's okay. We're going to color over everything. Okay, and now I will think about a couple of basic mountain shapes. I'm not going to draw those little fiddly details with the ripples, because if I do that and have those edges now, it'll make it much more difficult later. I'll be like, oh, I have to follow those exact lines to make it work. Okay, mountain on the left. Mountain. See, I'm getting it really close up there to the top edge. Mountain on the right. Coming down. The other mountain, let's see if I can point to it. There, that one. Coming up behind, and it will be behind this one as well. So I'm making it touch that edge, and then there's some little pieces of mountain you can see way in the back. That have the snow on them. Here it is. That's our basic sketch in. Next, if you would like to use blue tape to block out snow areas, you can do that now before starting to paint. So I'm going to do a demo example. If I get some little pieces, if the edge of it is rough, it actually can work better for this because the mountain itself is craggy. And if I tear the tape so that I don't have a flat side, I just have edges all around, then it can look like a little piece that would be maybe like that of the snow. And then I could put another little piece here, another little piece here. It wouldn't have to match exactly with what I'm seeing there. It would look about right. Okay, but I'm actually not going to do it that way. If you are doing it that way, just leave it there until you're all done and peel it up at the end of the painting. Oop, it's gone. Okay. So I'm going to try that gouache. All right. Ready to begin. I will do layers on this one, layers of paint. And I stretched this paper a little while ago. It's a little on the damp side. But I think it will be dry enough. It's not shiny. So I think it will be dry enough to work. starting with the large brush and going from back to front, from light to dark. Farthest back is the sky. Putting a wash in for the sky. If this doesn't end up being dark enough for the sky, you can always go over it again later after it's dry. Okay, I'm not doing clouds in the sky. Yes, there are clouds there, but they're not really my focus. Now, if I want, because I know that there's some reflection of clouds here, so that would match with some clouds here. If I want to just do, say, a little bit of cloud, but I don't want it to be the focus. I can take a piece of my tissue that I'm using for drying things and just dry a tiny bit. So then it will kind of give an impression of, okay, there's a cloud. Just a bit. Tiny. The other clouds over here, I will totally ignore that. That won't be very useful for this picture. And if you think it looks good for how things work together, if it needs another little cloud over here, I can do just a tiny bit more. See, I've crumpled it up. Makes it kind of longer and thinner. It looks like just a flat shape, so I'm kind of fiddling with it to not have it totally a rectangle. Because a totally rectangle cloud looks a little weird. Next, I'm going to go for the water. And the water is also blue. It's a darker blue. I'm going to start off with my darker blue, but not make it too dark. In fact, I'm just going to see if I already got this mix here. Just going to add some dark blue to that mix. But keep plenty of water. That way, any parts that I want to darken later, I just darken it later. We'll layer this. Okay, the whole thing. All of this. Not too dark. Yeah, that's good. Right now, that looks dark compared to this. But once this dries and I keep adding layers, this won't be quite as dark. Washing my brush. mountains. Now, the mountains, I could put just one color over the whole thing to start with, but I'm not going to do that because you will notice that the mountains are different colors as they go back. Look at the color, the lighter area of the mountain that's closer to us. I'm intentionally talking here to let the watercolor dry, just so you know. Okay, but anyway, the mountains that are closer to us, and it helps to understand this too for the color, that are closer to us, see how it's kind of a greenish looking brown? And then you compare it as you go back, the color gets more blue. And if you look at the mountains that are way in the back, it's kind of almost purpley blue. It's like a tan, but it's kind of purpley blue. But then so the mountains, as they're coming forward, it gets more greenish, more yellowish, and when it's going farther back, it's going to look more bluish. So this is a color transition to think about. Now, I'm going to start working on the mountains that are further towards the back. I'm going to use a purple. I've got blue. I'll put a little red in that blue. Look at it, think about it. Yep, okay. I'm satisfied. Let's do it. Okay, if you have tape there, you just paint right over the tape area. And if this brush is too big for that part, switch to your medium-sized brush. Atmospherics. Making things look like they are going back in space and you see the atmosphere. Okay, next one. Coming a little forward. I've got my color. It's kind of blue. I'm going to add a bit of yellow into it. Might turn green. I don't really want it like green, right? Actually, I think the tan color will work better with this. Blue, tan, and it's not greenish, it's kind of more brownish, right? So if I put a little red, then it will dull it down and I'll get more of a brownish color. Let me check here. I'm checking my color. I'm like, it's still a little bit more reddish. Okay. Checking. Okay. I think we're there. Okay, so you could play with your tan, your red, and your blue and see about when you get there. Not too dark. Remember, you can always use another layer on there. Okay. It is too green, I will admit. So I think I may do another layer later where it's more of a tan color, more brown tan color. But it will be fine because I can layer this because it will need to get darker. Okay, then this color actually that I just mixed, I think that works a little better for this area. But maybe with a little more yellow in it. Or tan, I should say. A little bit more of the tan. Okay, give it a try. Yes, Yes, I think that's a yes there. Okay, good. Now that color is just in the light area of that mountain, but I will spread it over the whole mountain. Yes, those colors will bleed into each other a little bit. Doesn't matter. Right now, it doesn't matter. Because I haven't put in the real dark part. And this side too, I need some color on this side. This is probably about the same distance away. I'm going to use the same color to start off with, but it will get darker. I'm going to be going back and forth between the water and the mountains. The next step I'm going to think about is the water. I can see that I've got too much water on my paper to continue. Therefore, I need to dry it a bit. Otherwise, I won't get those nice edges, because I like how those ripples create nice edges there. Not quite dry enough. While this is drying, I can think about what kind of color I'm going to use for the dark area. A lot of times we just think, oh, well, it's dark. Okay, but what color? It looks like a dark blue on a lot of the ripples, but notice that there's a reflection of the mountain. It's really a reflection of the mountain. So whatever colors are on the mountain tend to end up down there in the water. You could see, particularly from the second mountain back, like those streaks and as little pieces of snow, but we don't need to get quite that detailed. I think what I'm going to try to do is start with a purplish blue color, but have a lot of pigment because I want it to get pretty dark. And then touch some green in there, right at the base of, some dark green in there, right at the base of the mountain, and try to touch some more like darker blue into another area. Let's see. Am I pretty good? Yes, almost. Ready. Medium brush, because if I do this part with the larger brush, it's hard to get the little strokes of the ripples. Okay. Purplish. I think that actually the dark blue is probably a better choice than the light blue. And I want it to be kind of purpley. Fairly dark. Okay. We could do it. Ready. We can do it. Okay. Ooh. I like it. going to start rippling over here. The ripples will be kind of uneven, so you don't want to go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. You want to like forward, backward, forward, backward, so that it's more like this. Okay. Oh, that part's too wet. See? It's blending up. That's okay. Actually, it looks kind of nice. Okay, ready. Looking at my ripples here. And then this edge over here is a little bit more solid. Not totally solid, but think how far down are these ripples gonna come? There's maybe about to here. Thinking about making it uneven. So that it looks more natural. Okay. All right. All right. All right. Going across now over this way. So I'm going to start underneath this mountain. I know it's not purple enough yet. It'll have to get there on another layer, huh? If you already made yours purple enough, then or if it's already purple, then you don't have as much work to do as me. Okay, done. The ripples coming here, notice how they're bigger. So I want a bigger ripple over here. Okay, and there's that interesting bit right about here. Nice and big and kind of uneven and ripply looking. Okay, and that connects off the edge. So just like thinking about clouds going off the edge, the ripples will go off the edge too, not just stop like right here and then it's like, what happened? What happened to the ripples in the lake? Oh, I have to mix up more color. Not quite enough. Okay, and then this area gets pretty solid and dark. So if I want to use this brush, I can. I think I'm going to stick with this one. Okay. Just might take a little longer to fill, and also it means I still don't have enough of that color mixed up. Okay, keep going, keep going. Back over. It needs to touch the other ripples I already made because that whole area is dark. But I can leave some little patchy spaces in here. Kind of like that. This looks a little like staircasey. So I'm gonna not have it quite, there we go, right? If it's not even, it looks a little more natural. Piece over here in that corner makes it kind of fill out that corner a bit more. Okay, haha. Ripples, and there's also some other interesting colors going on in there. One thing I'm going to do is stick some green in there. dark green with this. Plenty on my brush. And once I put the green up here, that will match with it and look more correct. Okay, and as I'm going this direction, it's getting even darker. So I'm going to see about, while it's not totally dry yet, I'm going to see about using that dark blue, maybe a little red still. See if I can, ooh, nice and dark. Yes. And we actually kind of want the edges here for the ripples, so you don't have to blur the edges of the ripples. And if you don't get right to the edge of each ripple, it actually will make it look more like the wave is turning and you're seeing the different colors. So if you leave a little space like that on some of the areas, it actually can make it look better than if you try to go perfectly right to the edge. Okay. Really dark, not much water. Trying to go up and touch that green. It's still wet in there. I think it's harder to see the green, but I think once it dries, you'll see it more. And I don't want a hard edge there, so if it's wet and wet, then it will work better. Few more dark patches. And maybe a little bit more on a couple of these. Just hit the inside of it with some darken it up. Yep, it's working. That's an oops right there. But I'm not going to worry about it. If I don't like it though, I can try to soften the edge a bit. There. Yeah, it kind of does. But partly why I'm not worried about it is because the mountain is rough anyway. So it makes sense. While you know what? Let's do the other part of the water over here too. Notice that you have the darker areas of the ripples, but then you also have interesting things happening here, where you have lighter areas and darker areas. There is actually some interesting green down here, very light. And then there's, you know, some medium kind of blue going on in pieces in here. So let's do a bit of that. I'll use this green again, my olive green, but with more water in it. I think, yep, this is dry enough. I don't want to stick it on this shouldn't be wet into wet, right? See how I've got a crispy edge here? If I've been working here, this should be plenty dry enough now to add just a bit of detail lightly. Oh, yep, it's working. And if it looks a little kind of wiggly, uneven, that will actually help instead of a really flat line. A couple pieces up here, but there isn't really much green up there. Okay, now I want the lighter blue to use for some of the details in here. So it's darker, I'm darkening it, but I'm using the lighter blue and more water because I don't want it to go dark like this. A little more. Yep, nice. Okay, giving it a try. Ripples all same direction. Just wherever I see that the ripple is what I'm doing is leaving the light areas of the ripple and then adding some darker area. So wherever you would see the that part of the ripple gets a little darker, like it's flowing, the water's flowing, then I put something in there. And they can touch. It's fine if they touch. For the spacing, what you want to avoid is very, very even spacing because it won't look natural. Just bigger in the foreground and smaller, thinner in the background. That's another tip too. Bigger, smaller, like fatter, thinner. And uneven. Okay, that's some reflection of this mountain coming down in to the water, and some here and here are lighter, won't go as much there. Yeah, that's a little darker, not quite so bright in those areas. Okay, it's getting there. I think I can come in with another layer over that, but I'll let that dry for now and then we'll look at it in a bit. Let's do mountains. So back to that mountain in the background. I'm sticking with a purpley blue color, some of my light blue, some red. Add a few. It needs a little more purpleness, I think, and not so dark. I don't like how dark that's getting. This mountain is way in the back, and if I make the details on it super dark, it will pop forward more. It has to stay back. So I'll water that down because that was too dark. And then once that dries, if I think it's too light, I can go over it again. Next, this one, which I ended up with too much green and it should have stayed more purplish, but more like a reddish purple instead of a bluish purple. So, more red in my mix. That's too red, of course. Okay, and then not so bright, not like a really bright purple. So if I put a little yellow, the tan in there, that will dull it down and not make it a super bright kind of purple. I feel like some colors, it's really hard to figure out exactly what color it is because it's this brown color and it's very in between, but it's beautiful and I want it to be that beautiful color. This is one of those. Okay, so I'm going to think hard about this one. Does it look right? It does right now to me, but let's find out. Okay, so not too much. I'm going to use more of the water. Oh, I think it worked. Okay, better. Okay. This is going to be all a bit darker than here, except for the snow parts. So I do need that all to darken up a bit. More like that. Okay, those will be the lighter areas on the mountain. That's the darker areas on that mountain in the back. Okay, back to here. I've got my lighter areas here. I'm going to go for green. I'm going to go for that green. I think I will also use the big brush because that area is still quite large. This part of the mountain is more green. This part of it is kind of more brown, but I think I'll layer that on top of the green. So I've got my green, but I want it to have more yellow in it. So it's not super bright, but it's brighter. A little more yellow. And I'll add that on this side too, even though a lot of this will get covered up with bluish, brownishness, something later. But why not? Because the thing with watercolors is the more that you layer it, the darker it gets, and I really want it to get dark anyway, so let's see how we're doing. Okay. Lighter green. Here we go. Oh, I forgot. See, that's going to spread there if I don't do something. Okay. Gonna have to come come back and touch that. And I'll even do it over on these parts here that are not really going to be very green. Try it green. You can do it. Don't spread. We'll see. Okay, I think that's going to work. But notice now that this is dry or drier, look at the green reflecting. It works. Because the mountain is up here. Ooh. I did touch some dark blue into here so that it would have that edge. You can also just take a smaller brush if you don't have that edge there. Later, you can add an edge. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the photo for myself and take a look. Yeah, okay, so that area on this side, it's not actually like a brown, it's a dark green. So I'll continue with green on there, and then because it's covered with trees, then let me see on this one with the shadow on it. There's dark green and some more bluish shadows on this side. So let's do some dark green over here. Got it, right? So yeah, the green, but with a touch of blue that will darken it up. Yep. And I think that area will be dry enough that I can add this in. And also, it's nice to have an uneven sort of edge here. It gives it more of a craggly look. And if it's still kind of wet, then it will help to blend in and not have as much of a crisp edge here. Leave a little of the lighter color there, I think, but I'm gonna go in with more of the dark blue added into it. And while this is still wet, let me just see if I can, it's a bit too wet, but it'll kind of do something here. Add some, I'm going to add some ridges. I need more color. More shadow on this side. And there's these ridges that come down. Okay, but if it spreads, it's probably better because that's not the super detailed part. Little on this side. Because something going to let that part up there with the mountains dry, back down to the water. And my smaller brush. And thinking about where's the lighter area, where's the darker area. This area here is the lightest. This is kind of lighter. This area up in here looks darker. So I should do another layer of the light blue. But not make it a choppy little block, right? Just wiggly edges that go along with whatever I've already got there. I'm looking at the picture when I'm deciding where to put these marks. It can be helpful to keep looking at the photograph when you're doing this to help you decide where is this going, where is that part going, how dark should I have this part or that part. Are my lines coming off the edge enough? Okay, a little darker in some of these. And I'm keeping those ones thinner. In the back. Okay, yep, now I can start to see the lighter area here and here. If you find that in this area the lines are too even, like the left edge and the right edge of the line is too even, you can lengthen a couple of those lines in either direction. Like right here, that feels very evened out. And if I just say stretch one of those lines out, now it doesn't feel as much like that. Okay, I think we are ready for darker areas on here. And then we continue with more details on the mountains. So the darker areas on this mountain look more purpley, more blue, purple. Like this, dark blue. Dark blue, bit of red, but more just blue color. The way the ridges are going down, see these ones go down this way. The ones in the middle of it kind of go a little bit more straight down, but it depends on the angle of the mountain. See, it's going like this, like that, and there's a little bit going this way that you can see is dark. I'm going to start over here. That's very blue. I'm going to keep it though, because it should be kind of blue going back there. Okay, the snow melt, the runoff going that way. Now this side. Trying not to get it to be all just like stripe, stripe, stripe. Do a little something different. Okay. Lightening a little bit more water as I'm putting it on that edge. I don't want it to be quite as dark. There. Okay. We'll see where that goes. I may need to darken some of the lighter areas after it dries, because the light areas might be too light here compared to the other areas. Because if you look, this mountain should be definitely darker than the sky. It's a little darker than the sky right now, but I think it should be even darker than that. But I have to let those areas dry first. Then I can take kind of a tannish purple, which sounds like a contradiction, a tannish purple to go over there. Meanwhile, up in here, I am going to use my little bitty brush and have some fun with details up on that mountain. Okay. I'll use the dark green that has dark blue and some of the green. Because there are some trees that grow up in this direction. Or they're kind of up in here. Getting it to look like there's trees clinging to the mountain. And they come down into the foreground. There's, I guess you could call it a little bit of a cliff. It's the shadow of the trees over here. If it doesn't make sense to do that, then don't do it. It looks like a line, but it's like a drop-off area that's dark. But I'm making it broken because I don't want your eye to just go, oh, look at that sharp line there on the mountain. What is it doing? It's like, oh no, that's just blending in. It's the trees. Okay, and not too dark over here. Just a few more details in the tree area. And the mountain needs some details. The bare mountain, I will use a brown for that instead. So I've got my brown over here. After I do these details, if I feel like this part of the mountain is too light, then I will also add more to that, because I think just like I'm talking about here where this part of the mountain looks too light, this part might look just a touch light as well. Okay. Brown. It's kind of a gray brown, so I will put a little black in my brown when I'm doing this. And not too dark, otherwise I'm going to chop into it and have like a hard looking line, because this is not that dark. And I can always darken it more if I need to. This side of that's shadow on that side. So pieces, bits of details to make it look rough and like some of the broken pieces of rock. Maybe they will slide down the hill. Keeping track of where the sun is coming from. Notice that this side is all dark. That's because the sun would be behind here and it's kind of shining this direction. So some areas of this mountain are shadow and some are light. So shadow is more on this side, light is more on this side. Didn't quite darken some of that enough, but that's okay. Now I can add a bit more. Okay, going over to this side. The shadows on this side look blue. Most of that is tree area. And that's why instead of looking more brown, the shadows look more blue. It's a darker green. And I don't know if it's the photograph making it look more blue, because I do notice that sometimes, actually all the time, photos will make the blue parts more blue, brighter in my photos, and it will make the red parts washed out. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed that in a photograph, but if I take a photo of something and I compare it, then I start thinking, oh, I need to color correct this. It doesn't look right. So here's blue. Putting some detail. This is covered with trees, so if I give it short vertical lines as part of the detail, it will feel more like it's trees. Look at that. Okay, 3 layers so far, I think. It's darkening up nicely. I want that shadow down here a touch darker. And you might notice that I'm using some diagonal lines. I'm looking at the shadows that are on that mountain, and it has ridges just like this or this, so the trees cover the ridges, and that's where I'm getting the diagonal lines from. Okay, we are getting there. We need, definitely that needs to get a bit darker. It's dry. Oh, no, it isn't. That's not dry. It's wet. Let's fix that. Don't spread. Don't spread. I think it's the paper is absorbing the moisture from all the areas around it. Okay. I'm going to call it close enough and we'll find out. I'll use some of this tan. I think that might help here. And tone it down just a smidge. Let's find out. Yes! Here we go. Because that whole area was too bright. This looks more correct. Now it stands out from the sky. Whereas you want the back mountains to sit back farther, so you want them to blend into the sky a bit more. And you want the front mountains to have more contrast, but still some of these areas are a bit on the light side, right? So I think, yeah, kind of a bit more of a tan color. That's the rock area, but not too much. So I'm going to keep that watery, and let's try that. What do I think? A little more. It'll dry actually a little lighter, and I have to remember that. This area on the rock, see, the sun is hitting that area, so maybe I'll leave that and see what happens. And not darken all of the rock as much. We'll find out when it dries. Okay, I'm thinking, yep. See, leaving that area there this will actually dry lighter, but leaving this area right here makes it have just a little extra pop. And we can look and see if we need anything else. Notice how these ripples are going kind of diagonal. It's doing that somewhat in the photo too. That actually, it's perspective, right? But not really. I mean, the fatter to thinner is perspective, but the reason why it's doing that is because of the mountains. See, that's a diagonal, that's a diagonal. So when it gets reflected in the water, of course, it shows up as if it's kind of like a diagonal going on. But those diagonals also, the point is, those diagonals guide our eyes back into the picture for the composition. See, these will guide our eyes down, these guide our eyes back, and then you look here and you go, oh, let me contemplate these mountains. I'm ready to add gouache. And if you put tape on, then let it dry a little longer before you take the tape off, and then see what you get. Okay. The gouache, it's not like watercolor exactly, so I won't leave it on my palette and let it dry. I'm going to put a little bit out. It's a bit dry already. Ew, we can do it. You can do it, gouache. I'm going to poke it. Oh, it's got a hard crust on it. Hold on. Solution. Poking it with a knife. I hope it will work. See, I should have opened this up first before doing the demo, huh? And then I would know. Ooh, I got through. Okay. Poked it. Okay, and I only need a little, so maybe I'll just use it off the end of this. But anyway, that's what happens with gouache, is it will get hard and you don't want to leave it directly on your palette. You'll want to wash it off. Okay, here we go. A little bit of snow. Okay, and it whitens just the area where you touch it. It does have kind of a hard edge there. Let me see about putting a little bit of water with it. That should make it softer in an area. So if I use a little water, then it kind of whites it, and it doesn't totally white it. It will still have that edge to it from the brush stroke, but it won't be quite as thick like whiteout. And if it doesn't give enough white, so if it doesn't white it out enough, you can go over that area again too. Trying to make these snow patches look like they're sitting in the crevices of the mountains instead of just tacked on in a random place. Okay, this one goes here near the top, and then it sits down in the crevice, hopefully. And I have to be careful not to overdo it with that, because it will just look weird. You. That's very random looking. Another thing I thought I could do with the gouache is I could try for a couple of details on the lighter areas of the ripples and see if that would make that brighten up, kind of like a burst area where the sun is. Could work. Oh, too much. Spread it. Just a touch. Okay, yeah, I think that's working. I'm not sure if you can really see it from the video or not. Maybe you can see it. One thing I do want to avoid is having the really super bright pop area in a place where I don't want to guide somebody's eye. So like in the photo, there's some mountains over here and they have a little snow on them. But if I do that like way over here and I create a big contrasty area, then your eye goes, what is that? What's over here? Whereas we want to keep the eye going to here. Okay, just about there. I'm going to lighten that area of snow. Okay, I think that the camera is making certain areas lighter looking than they're actually showing up, because when the gouache is drying, I'm noticing that it's not really totally covering everything. Like if I do several layers because I have water in the gouache, then it lightens it a bit more. But I think we are done. Okay. All right, and hope you enjoyed that. Different things that we're looking at today have to do with perspective, color, more yellow towards the front, more purple towards the back, larger versus smaller to make it look like it's going into the distance, thinking about what side the shadow is on. And that's it for today.